I think that the largest purchase I had made before 345K was like maybe $7,000. So pretty big jump going from, $7,000 maybe on a car to $345,000 on a home. And so even though I was only putting, 10 to 12K down, the risk factor and the thought of taking on that much debt in one transaction was terrifying. The end goal is net cash flow, financial freedom. So if you think about that, the door count is almost irrelevant. We may only end with 30, 50 properties, but our net cash flow might be $2, $3, $4 million a year because we built the portfolio to our end goal of that financial freedom target.
We in this thing dropping blue gems.
Let's go. Another episode of Blue Gems Podcast with none other, one of the co-founders of Blue Gems, Aidan Groll. Let's go. Wow, man. I literally love this format. No disrespect to having guests on. They're awesome, but
the disrespect is real.
It's cool to just dive in with you. But this interview is all about you, man. We want to know, I know your story, but for the people that don't know your story, the mic is all yours.
Yeah. So I guess I can start my story kind of around the 2018 timeframe. So at the time I was in corporate America as a corporate accountant. And essentially, I ended up Googling on my laptop how to retire early. And I came across this website called Bigger Pockets, right? And Bigger Pockets, they had this blog post around this concept called house hacking. And I was like, how is no one talking about the fact that you could essentially buy a primary residence and then either rent out the rooms or maybe get a multifamily? So I was infatuated with this whole concept of essentially buying a duplex and then renting one side and then living in the other. And so I took no action for the first year. That was 2018. And I realized that I needed to make more money, right? So if I was going to ever buy a rental property, I couldn't live off of just 50, 60K at the time. Basically, I was, on the typical American dream path where all the money that came in, I would either spend on weekend activities and, basically live paycheck to paycheck. So what I did was I started a wedding production company. So it was the fastest way that I can essentially double my income. So I was able to make, a couple $1,000s on the weekends filming weddings. I had a passion for videography, and it seemed like the easiest way for me to make more money faster rather than go back to college and go the CPA route, right? I was a corporate accountant, but that path just seemed longer for me to actually scale my income. And so that's exactly what I did, right? And then COVID comes, right? This black swan event, and all of a sudden, weddings are shut down. Basically any group gathering is shut down. So I had a ton more free time, right? So I was working my corporate accountant job. I was basically doing 40, 45, 50 hours a week, standard workload, and had all this free time gained from the wedding shutting down. And so that was when I went back to that, that article that I found in 2018. 2019, I was doing more and more research, again, taking no action. And I decided that in March 2020, I was going to actually buy a rental property. So what I did, I don't recommend this to anyone, is I just went and find the closest agent that I knew of at the time. So I went and found an agent that actually worked at my company at the time. He was also an accountant. So generally, you don't want to find an agent who is part-time when you're trying to buy, especially your first property. I had no idea what I was doing. And so I go to him and I say, hey, Jared, I'm looking for a duplex in these few zip codes, and my goal essentially is to have my mortgage paid for by the rental income of the other unit, right? And so we looked at, I think, 2 or 3 properties. We made a couple of offers. I got beat out by some cash buyers. So this was right around when things were getting pretty competitive. So this was before the COVID boom. I would say June 2020 was kind of where things really started to turn. So I got into the market at a weird time where people were still willing to hear out offers, especially if they were conventional financing. So on our third offer, we had some interest. It was a buyer who was a flipper. He had renovated both units, and he actually had one of the units on Airbnb, and then he was renting the other one to a long-term tenant. So I said, I would love to make an offer. I have an FHA loan. Are you willing to accept those types of loan products? Not every seller is, right? This is considered in the marketplace, I guess, a weaker offer from the standpoint of having more contingencies. So we made the offer. I remember, that night almost barely being able to sleep because I was just so nervous because my agent texted me and saying, he accepted the offer. It was $345,000. I think that the largest purchase I had made before $345K was like maybe $7,000. So pretty big jump going from, $7,000 maybe on a car to $345,000 on a home. And so even though I was only putting, 10 to 12K down, the risk factor and the thought of taking on that much debt in one transaction was terrifying. But I ran the numbers. I went online, started to find, calculators that I can figure out the gross rents and how much the net cash flow would be. Coming from an accounting background, that part was pretty natural to me. Didn't really have any issues, figuring out if the deal made sense. And so basically the numbers were around $2,000 for the mortgage with a 3% interest rate at the time. That was the market rate. And the tenant next door was paying $1,500. That was the long-term rental rate. And so there was a spread of $500, and me being, so infatuated with this whole house hacking, opportunity that I learned about, I really wanted to get the entire mortgage covered. So I actually went and found a person to rent a room in the unit that I was living. So I was renting a room, and then I had this long-term tenant. And so the gross rents were $2,200 and the mortgage was $2,000. So I was actually essentially getting paid to live. Now the room rental didn't last long because I realized that it just wasn't worth the $600 of income that I was getting, having to, share that. I had a girlfriend at the time, still do. So it was 3 of us living there. There was issues with cleaning dishes and taking out the trash. It was just a whole bunch of drama. So not worth the $600 by any means. But what it did was it gave me the proof of concept. Right. So I now understood that real estate was the vehicle that I can use to get out of my W-2 job. And so pretty quickly, I had a lot of income saved up, right? So no longer paying rent. I'm basically covering my entire mortgage. So I was paying around $1,800 in rent. That was completely saved through the new rental income on the mortgage. And so I started to be able to save capital pretty quickly. And so I was able to do my second deal around 8 months after the first one. I bought another duplex with 20% down. So I put about $50K down for a duplex, a 2-1 on each side, and that was just a traditional conventional financing deal. And then all of a sudden I had, the savings from my primary, I had additional income from this new rental property, and then I went on to find a new opportunity around a second house hack, right? Because after a year you can move out and do it again. And that's when I came across this whole short-term rental concept, right? Because one of the things that I learned from those first 2 transactions, those first 2 deals, was that long-term rentals wouldn't produce enough cash flow for me to be able to retire anytime soon or, exit my W-2. And so instead of making $100, $200 in net cash flow on a long-term rental, I was realizing that short-term rentals could produce, $1,000, $2,000, maybe even $3,000 a month in net cash flow. So way more attractive. Started to go down the rabbit hole, and I came to the conclusion that my third deal was going to be a house hack where I can have, essentially an ADU in my backyard. So I found a deal on market. It was a 2-1 in the main home, and then it had a separate detached concrete block ADU, which was completely gutted. Needed a full renovation, and it was the perfect opportunity for me, as a, semi-novice investor to not only learn about renovations and get that experience, but move into the short-term rental asset class. So that deal was, a 6, 7, 8 month renovation. We had to do the permitting. It was basically a new construction project. But at the end of the day, for the second time in a row, I was able to get a property where the rental income was completely covering the mortgage. And then from there, I was addicted.
Man, that was quite the intro for sure. I mean, I want to talk a little bit more about your background. You said that you have this accounting background and, obviously underwriting and, doing market analysis. Those things are going to come really easy to you. But what are some other intangibles that you think, has helped your real estate journey, having this background?
Yeah, I think coming from corporate America is actually an advantage, right? So in the beginning, I was always discouraged because I had this job where, I would see these entrepreneurs have the time freedom to be able to do what they want. And what I've come to realize is that if you come from a corporate background and you have a structured background, what you can do is actually take your skill set and then apply it into this new endeavor, this new business, right? So my corporate background has helped our company create systems, put in processes, because I was able to replicate what a Fortune 15 company, one of the biggest companies in the world, was able to do. So I copied some of their hiring processes, some of the questions that they ask on an interview, some of their practices around accounting, finance. I was able to see a lot of different components of the business and then bring it into a small business where, I've now become a co-founder and CEO.
Gotcha. Amazing. And so how are you juggling both W-2 and Blue Gems, or do you have any news for the listeners around that?
Yeah, so I officially exited my W-2 on February 21st, 2023.
Amazing.
So no longer in corporate America, was able to get out within a 5-year period from start to finish.
So this part of the journey is really admirable for me because I know the story, right? So let's kind of dive deep into, you setting that goal of, hey, I'm going to exit my W-2 in 5 years, and keeping that discipline and following the guidelines of, getting from A to Z. So let's dive into that, because I know there's a lot of listeners that are stuck in their W-2, that are, up this rat race and trying to get out. Let's talk about some of the hurdles that you had to go through.
Yeah. So if you think about it, the 5-year period that JB is talking about is when I first essentially discovered that I wanted to leave corporate America, which was around 2018. It was the time that I mentioned where I Googled, how to retire early from corporate America. And so at that point in time, I knew I wanted to exit, but I didn't really have an actionable plan. And real estate just seemed like the vehicle that I was going to do, but I didn't have any actionable steps to take to actually buy a property. And so that's why I pivoted to figuring out how to make more income, right? So my long-term thought process was, if I can make more money, I can save more capital, I can invest in real estate, I can increase my income, start to transition my income from being active to passive, right? The only way to really exit a W-2 and truly reach the financial freedom that you're looking for is if you're not having to work for all of your money. If you're having to work for all your money, whether it be through a business or another endeavor, then you're not truly reaching the goal that you're looking for. So my 5-year plan was really all about transitioning my income from active to more on the rental real estate and business income side.
Incredible. So after you leave W-2, like, what were your goals and aspirations? Like, because you now have to replace, a steady paying job, a lot of, security,
health insurance,
benefits, 401k, all of these things. Like, what's the next step for somebody that's leaving their W-2? Like, how do you replace all this free time that you have now?
Yeah, so that was the biggest thing for me, right? So I had actually replaced my accounting income through the wedding company, in early to late 2021. I don't remember the exact time. Started to make around the same amount of money doing that. But the problem was that it wasn't something that I wanted to do full time, right? I didn't want to dedicate 40 hours a week to that company, right? So finding something that you want to do and wake up every day to be excited, I think, is actually more important than the income part, right? Because anyone can go and find a new job or a new opportunity if you were to leave something that you didn't like. But the goal for me was not just replacing the income, but being excited about whatever I was going to be moving into. And so real estate, specifically short-term rentals and co-founding Blue Gems, was one thing that I felt I can dedicate all my time to and transition smoothly from corporate America into, that opportunity.
Let's talk about co-founding Blue Gems, because I've told my story, and everyone's going to have their own perspective and how it impacted their lives or where they were during that period of time. So like your story on how Blue Gems transpired to what it is today.
Yeah, so Blue Gems all started on one Instagram message. It's actually funny because I tell this to people all the time. I would say the top 5 people in my life I've actually all met through Instagram or some other social media platform, right? So JB actually cold DM'd me. He said, hey, any interest in meeting up for coffee? You have a pretty cool page, et cetera, et cetera. And most of the time, I actually would ignore those messages, right? Because I get, a lot of cold DMs. At the time, I was more focused around content and photography. So you have a lot of people who are reaching out to collaborate on, a photo job or, create content together. So I had actually stopped being open to those types of meetings. But this particular message, I remember seeing when I was, still at the W-2, obviously, and I got the notification on my phone, opened it right away. You seemed like you had a charismatic way to approach your following, and it seemed like people really liked being around you. And for me, I'm always looking at, if I were to get in a relationship with someone, whether it be business or just a general friendship, are they exactly like me, or do we have a lot of differences, right? I actually look for that because I don't want to only be friends with other accountants and then people who have the same skill set or, are very similar to myself. So it seemed like we had, just similar values in terms of just how people were engaging on your page, but we seemed like we actually were not very much alike in terms of our personality types. So that part alone was interesting to me.
I love that. So let's talk about what you actually do in Blue Gems, because I think we all founders wear different hats, and like you said, we have different personalities and skill sets. What is your general role? And separate question, what do you enjoy doing the most in the business?
Yeah, so the way that I describe it, putting it, as simply as possible, my job is...
We are thrilled to announce Blue Gems Management. After building out 24 short-term rental properties of our own, we're now helping other investors buy their time back. With over 300 5-star reviews, we really understand the importance of guest experience. If you're interested in making short-term rentals passive, click the link in the show notes below and someone from our team will contact you soon. Now back to the show.
So the way that I describe it, putting it, as simply as possible, my job is to make sure that the company is efficient as possible and making as much money as possible, right? So essentially 2 objectives, right? Making more money and just driving efficiency. Driving efficiency meaning, is there something that we can implement, whether it be a system, a person, a procedure, to make our lives easier and just overall more enjoyable. And so going back to the point around, taking some of my corporate background, I think that's where I've been able to excel when it comes to, quote unquote, being the integrator in the company. And then in terms of what I enjoy doing the most, it has to be around underwriting deals. We're always getting distracted about a new opportunity, a new sub-2 deal, a new creative deal that doesn't fit our buy box. And I think it's just because we really like the chase, right? I like looking at new opportunities. In fact, sometimes I would say we go as far to ignore opportunities in our own portfolio to increase income and go look for that new shiny object, that new seller finance deal, that new sub-2 deal, even though we can make more money by just improving our current portfolio.
Love that. And then I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about one of your personality traits that I think is is almost a double-edged sword, respectfully, right? You are a workaholic. You can really put your head down and get a lot of stuff done. But sometimes you don't give yourself a break to go travel or get away or just let loose. I want to hear your perspective because, it's interesting. Like, you actually enjoy working. Like, that is where you find a lot of excitement and joy. So let's talk about that work-life balance and where you are with that right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the societal norms that, someone could put on us, right? So the norm in our society is to have some sort of balance between work and personal and work and enjoyment, right? So the structure that was put in place is you work Monday through Friday and you have the weekends off. But no one actually knows if that's right or wrong, right? That was just what was created, and a lot of people just, took that as, what they should do with their life. So I don't like conforming to any societal pressure of I should be working Monday through Friday or working 7 days a week or 4 days a week. I prefer to work when I feel energized and when I feel motivated, and then to take time off when I'm feeling unproductive or, I'm capped out. I would rather, work 18 hours one day and then 5 hours the next than have a standard 8-hour schedule. And that's what I didn't like about corporate, right? So moving into an opportunity where I could be my own boss and run my own company, I have a lot more flexibility and I'm able to manage my calendar and just be more productive overall. So I think for me, I've never looked at it as a balance. I've always just looked at it as trying to get as much freedom as possible so I can create my calendar and my week, based on how I want it to be.
And then, let's talk about, like, we know all of the reasons someone would want to get into real estate. What's your exact reason? Why did you choose real estate? I know we talked about cash flow, but like, is there a bigger goal at the end of the tunnel? Like, what are you trying to build? Why are you working so hard? Let's talk about that.
We all have, or we all know the famous quote that we actually don't know who said it, but real estate has produced the most millionaires out of anything else in the world. And same for me, that was like the biggest drawing.
That's exactly my thought too.
So it was like, well, if real estate is producing the most millionaires, why don't I get into real estate, right? If I want to be a millionaire. And that's what I wanted to do. My overarching goal, and I tell this to people often, my number one goal was to have a $1 million net worth by age 30, right? So I'm approaching my 28th birthday here in a week or so. And so the reason how I come to those numbers, I think it's important not to just put $1 million figure out, but let's say I own around $10 million of real estate. That would be my goal by age 30, $10 million portfolio. If I have a 90% LTV, meaning I have, 90% mortgage balance against the equity in those properties, then I only have, 10% equity, and that would be $1 million net worth, right? And that's a comfort level thing for me. So I feel comfortable that the market wouldn't go down more than 10%, and I'm young enough where even if it did, I can recover over the long haul. And so in terms of a goal and why I got into real estate, it was simply because it can give me the financial freedom and the passive income that I was looking for at a young age, as opposed to other avenues.
Love that. And then, so out of everything that you're building right now, what is one of the biggest factors that you can attribute to your success in building all of this? From the wedding company, your Turo company, you've had side hustles, you've excelled in school. Like, what are some of the biggest factors to any of the success that you've had so far?
Yeah, for me, it's all around discipline, right? So it's just getting up and doing the boring work consistently, again and again, day after day. I built the wedding company by essentially not taking any days off from my day job and basically using all my vacation to shoot weddings and build rapport with clients and do the marketing and the branding. And so a lot of people wouldn't be willing to make the sacrifice of, using their weekends and their weeknights to go and build another company on the side. And I've just been really good at doing what other people aren't willing to do. I was willing to buy a rental property instead of a primary residence, right? All my friends, they went out and they bought homes for personal use that were probably over their budget. Instead, I went and built a rental portfolio. All of my friends spent their weekends going out, hanging out at the beach, doing whatever. I went and built another company to make more money. All of my friends essentially went back to school to increase their income, and then instead I went and built multiple businesses. So I think overall I was just willing to do what others weren't, and that comes down to discipline.
So you have 42 short-term rental properties right now. What's next? Like, what are you trying to scale to? Where are you trying to grow this business?
Yeah, great question. So going forward, 2023 into 2024, we're actually looking to reposition our portfolio. So I'm trying to move away from door count. I think sounding and saying 42 doors sounds cool in practice. But if you really think about the end goal is net cash flow, financial freedom, being able to build a business that you can walk away from and have some time freedom. So if you think about that, the door count is almost irrelevant, right? If I told you, hey, you can have one door, but it produces $1 million of net cash flow a year, or 100 doors that produces $1 million of net cash flow a year, which one are you going to pick? You're obviously going to pick the one door.
Absolutely.
And so for our company, we're trying to take those 42 properties, optimize them to maximum profitability, and reposition the ones that don't make sense, that don't hit our net cash flow goals. And we may only end with 30 to 50 properties, but our net cash flow might be $2, $3, $4 million a year because we built the portfolio to our end goal of that financial freedom target.
Okay, so like one thing that I think that you do an excellent job at in our business is training our new hires. The way that you format the training, kind of glomming on the most important topics. Like, where did you develop this type of skill? Because that's a difficult skill. Leadership and training is something that you really have to cultivate and lean into. So where'd that all start at?
Yeah, that was one that didn't come natural for me, right? So I tell people, if you want to develop the skill, you have to get, repetitions regardless of what it is. So for me, I had always accepted any opportunity to move into a leadership role, right? So when I was a kid, it would be captain of the soccer team. In college, it became, captain of the track team, and becoming a resident assistant, an RA, joining clubs, becoming vice president or president, leading group projects. I was always the person that people joke around that does all the work, and then everyone else kind of, gets the passing grade. But the thought process for me doing that, I didn't really care if someone was benefiting off of my work or my production, because I knew long term I'm going to come out ahead, right? If someone else is benefiting from my contributions to a project, I know that I'm the one leading and gaining those skills to long term be able to run a company and lead others, right? And so for me, it was just always accepting the opportunity to grow. And from the training side, I think a lot of people overthink it, right? So the number one thing that we hear about when we're hiring a new candidate about what they didn't like about their old company was just not being heard, right? Just bad communication. And that can come through a lack of feedback, right? Not having one-on-ones, weekly meetings, monthly touch points, or just not having good communication overall, right? Just a gap between the supervisor and the direct report. And so in our company, we've made it a point to focus on communication above all else. Even if we drop the ball on our system or our process and we are not making progress from that side of things, at least we will always at a minimum have good communication.
Love it. And then what if short-term rentals are just completely banned and outlawed forever, automatically with a snap of a finger? What asset class would you pivot to?
Multifamily, for sure. Multifamily, because I wouldn't want to go backwards, right? So if you think about short-term rentals, I talk a lot about cash flow. if we're already making considerable cash flow on a short-term rental, I don't want to now go into long-term rentals. Now, the only way I would do that is if we're talking about scale, and scale would come through essentially apartment buildings, right? So 1 to 4 units, we're talking about residential real estate. I would want to get into commercial 5 units or more and start syndicating deals, raising capital to do bigger deals with other investors that we have through our, Blue Gems network. Because even though they're interested in short-term rentals now, people graduate, people evolve, and I think we'll have opportunities to do bigger deals down the road.
And let's rewind all the way to when you first started in real estate. Is there anything, you asked me this question, so I thought it was a cool one to ask you. Is there anything that you wish that you would have changed or that you would change?
Yeah, I would have done bigger deals faster, and I would have raised private capital earlier. So one of the things that attracted me to partnering with you was your ability to go from 0 to 12 short-term rentals in basically 6 months, right? That was essentially unheard of for me. I was very much under the impression that I could only scale with my own capital, right? So that first deal was all of my own money from filming the weddings on the weekends. My second deal actually put down around 50 to 60 grand in one 250K deal, which wild. I would never do again.
Yeah, we would never do that right now.
So much capital tied into one deal because I was under the limiting belief that only Aidan Groll could invest in his own deals, right? I didn't know that I can partner or raise capital, mainly because I thought I wasn't experienced enough. But you taught me that it doesn't really matter about the experience. It matters about your reputation and your execution. And so we've been able to scale dramatically because our reputation is above everything. And then we're able to execute on all the opportunities that people give us.
And then I think I'm giving you all the praise, props where props are due. I think you do a really good job at giving people advice, especially when they're first starting out. So if you could drop one gem for people that are just getting into real estate, maybe they just started listening to Bigger Pockets, you go back to where we started, right? What would you leave with them?
Yeah, so one thing that I would have done differently is I would have found or tried to pay for a mentor or someone that was already ahead of me. When I was in corporate America, just starting out, back in even 2020, I was very much against coaching programs and mentorship programs. I thought that I could learn it all myself and do it by myself, and I was able to figure it out. But I made so many mistakes by not just paying someone ahead of me or trying to partner with someone who was ahead of me. So I could have avoided all of those hurdles had I just not been stubborn and been willing to give up a piece of the pie to learn and grow. If I were to move into another asset class or go down a different avenue in real estate, that's exactly what my approach would be. I would just partner with someone who's already ahead of me, who's the expert in that niche, and then I would bring my skill set to the table. So if they're good at raising capital, I would say, hey, I can come in as an operator. You can raise the money, and that's how we're going to buy this 100-unit apartment building.
Love that. Let's get to know you, Aidan, outside of real estate. So we know that you're a corporate accountant. You have this very, sophisticated and organized aura about you. But what do you like to do in your free time? What do you do for enjoyment?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of my enjoyment, free time is spent, listening to podcasts or doing a lot of education. I love working out. I think my perfect day starts with a workout in every scenario, but I love the most, I would say, traveling. So back in 2017, my senior year of college, I went on a life-changing trip. I was in Europe for about 40 days, and that taught me that, a lot of things in life that we view to be important just really aren't that important. I was able to live in cheap hostels, and me and my friend were able to go to France and Germany and Belgium, Luxembourg, Spain, all in a 5-week period. And I've always thought about that trip and wanted my life to have a lot of travel if I ever were to reach my financial goals. And so, part of getting into real estate was allowing me the freedom to go on those trips and experience life through a different lens than most are able to.
And then as we start to wrap up, what do you hope that people end up remembering you by?
I really hope people just remember simply how I treated them. And I think that is overall what people remember the most. And I always remember that in anything that I do, whether it's business, real estate, even when I was an employee, right? My reputation is so important to me. So at the end of the day, you can make all the money in the world, you can have all the success, but how you treat people has always been at the forefront, at least for me. And so if people can remember me for anything, it would just be that I was caring and I was genuinely interested in what they wanted to do with their life and their success.
And if you could leave one last gem,
the blue gem.
It could be about real estate, it could be about short-term rentals, it could be about corporate America, or it could be about life in general. What would you want to leave the listeners?
Yeah, I would leave. It's funny because we ask this question to every single person on our podcast, and I love hearing the answers. But for me, it would simply be the fact that you never want to limit your abilities. You can do pretty much anything that you believe you can do, and I thought that I could not. And so that's why I say it. Listening to 70 plus episodes on our show about people who have done all these crazy things, what I've come to learn is that a lot of them have no idea what they're actually doing. And so instead of trying to figure out every single thing before you get started, just start, figure it out along the way, and you will be surprised what you can accomplish. You are no different than myself, JB, an investor who has 100 units. You can get there as long as you follow the process, follow the steps, stay disciplined, and believe that you can do it. If you limit yourself to your own internal controls, you're never going to be able to get there. So I think it starts with the mindset and believing that, with the proper team, the proper help, the proper resources, you can do the same thing that all of us are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point because, we started this podcast not to pretend that we're gurus or coaches or experts. We will never claim that. Right? We've only been in real estate for 2.5, 3 years total, right? How can you be an expert at anything with such short period of time? But what we are trying to do is we're trying to share a lot of the mistakes that we've made, the lack of experience in challenges that we've had to overcome and how we have overcome them. So just sharing our journey. We're not experts. We're not coaches. We're not claiming to be any of that. But we do want to share a lot of our mistakes. And other people's mistakes in their journey and how they've been able to, excel and succeed. And to Aidan's point, right? We're all human. We have the same amount of days or same amount of hours in the day. And, we can accomplish a bunch even whenever we don't think it's possible. So I love that answer for sure. Dude, what an episode.
What an episode. The Blue Gems podcast.
No, this was awesome, man. I hope that, everyone got to know a little bit more about Aidan. He's a terrific human being. He really does lead by example and treat people the right way. But he has the skills and the work ethic to kind of back it up as well. So appreciate this episode, brother.
Appreciate you. Good stuff.